Right.
Hello, everyone. We're having Lisa Greenleaf today. Hello, Lisa.
Hi, Andre.
Great.
Hi, everybody else also.
Great to have you. Great to see you. So, we are having this, what I call Learn One Thing event, where we're talking about how to deal with stuttering, how to live with stuttering, how to, some call it overcome, whatever we're trying to do with stuttering to live in like a fulfilled life, right? That's probably what we all want to do. And the starting point, the topic, the idea that you picked was conquer the fear. And first of all, as the way of introduction, your introduction, I want to say that you are very active in the stuttering support groups, doing posts, comments, videos, and that takes, like, for a person who stutters, usually it takes a lot of courage. So the question is, conquer what kind of fear? What would you say? Because, like, what is that fear that we're trying to conquer? And maybe a couple words, how do you manage to conquer it?
It's not easy, and I think it was a real process. To give a little bit of history, prior to 2018, I didn't know anything about any of this. I had stuttered my whole life, and I just thought I had to live with it. I was taught very young that I could correct it, and I wasn't working hard enough, which isn't really true, but that's what I thought most of my life, because that's what I had been taught. When I was in school, we of course worked on, reading words and techniques, and I never really thought they were very helpful. So around about 2018, I'd kind of hit a low point where I didn't want to talk, basically, because it was so hard to get the words out, I didn't want to talk. So I felt like that was a very low, like a super low point. And so I went to see a speech therapist, which I didn't want to do because when I was a kid it was horrible. So, but I reached a point where if it was going to be learning techniques to help me talk, that's what I wanted to do. So I went to her. She was excellent. She pretty much told me that, it's not an easy problem to cure, that you can't really cure it. She helped me learn how to talk with less struggle, because that was part of my problem before, was I would get caught. Every 2 to 3 words, I'd say, I was caught for like a half a minute. You can't really communicate like that. So It took a little bit of work on her part to get through to me that talking isn't about fluency. Talking is about communicating ideas. And so I really did a lot of work on why I felt I had to be fluent all the time, because that's what I wanted. I wanted my speech to be 100% fluent, 100% of the time, which, as we all know, can't happen. I mean, even people who don't have this problem are not 100% fluent. And I would judge every time I talked, that word was bad, that word was bad. And when you're talking like that, you're not really present,
Right.
So when I analyzed it, I realized I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of talking to people I didn't know. I didn't know. I was afraid of talking to people I was even close to, because I had this pressure, like it must be fluent all the time. So that pressure was making it hard, because I knew if I talked, I wasn't going to be fluent. And so I was afraid of rejection. I was afraid of judgment. I was afraid that I couldn't I couldn't succeed because of my speech. And I've come to learn that that's not true. I mean, I have a great job. I do really well. So when I looked at the whole thing, I was doing well in life. I just had to feel more present. And part of that was letting go of that pressure and not caring, I guess, about judgment that comes from people externally. So that's what I mean by conquer the fear. It's really of the whole thing. It's of making a call. It's of being on these unrecorded things. It's, talking to people, talking to anyone, so that I just want to go through the world like everybody else. And if I get caught up on a word here or there, who cares? It's a little word. I got through it. I got over it. So as I let go of the pressure, it became easier to talk. And I found I wanted to talk. And of course, I mean, obviously I'm not 100% fluent at all, but it's a lot easier to talk than it was in 2018. I've come a long way since then, so I am still working on it. But at this point, I feel like I conquered a lot of those problems. Like I can make a call without a problem. I can do these recorded things without a problem. I can talk to anybody anywhere. And if I get a, odd look, I'm not really worried about it. So I think that's what I mean by conquering the fear, I guess.
And when you say we get an odd look, like what is the... Because, like that's oftentimes in grains and boom, and we go to that shell. So what is that new thing you're telling yourself? Or maybe you're telling that person who is giving that odd look, or maybe both. What can we do?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't really advertise. I don't tell anybody what's happening, but I'll look at them. And so if I get caught up on a word, I'll look at them and I'll talk through it and I'll look like there's nothing wrong. And so they get the hint, I'm okay, they're okay. The look that you get is not judgment like I thought for a long time. For years I thought, they think I'm not good enough, or that I'm not this or I'm not that. It's really confusion. They don't know what's happening. A person walks up to them. They look like a regular person. All of a sudden, they're caught up on the words. So when they look at a person, and of course, prior to this, I used to sort of twitch a lot, look away. There was a whole lot of body language that went along too. So I acted oddly, I talked oddly. They're going to respond oddly, So when I looked at it from a more objective way, I did realize, of course, they're going to react to what's happening because it is odd. I mean, it's an odd thing. So I guess that's how I stopped letting that control me, is that I realize people are not all the time, especially now, the more confident I am and the more okay with it I am, I don't get that same look or reaction now. Whereas before I kind of get that, weirdness, and, you kind of... and that's what I would internalize. That's what I didn't want. I didn't want to have them have that sort of a reaction to me. But when I realized it's really just they're confused. They're not angry or annoyed. They're confused. You know, and I found that, I could tell them what's happening and go into a whole big thing, but I don't want to. I want to just live like everybody else. So I just look at them and I sort of, without telling them, I prove to them that I'm okay. This isn't something, odd that just sort of came over me. This is how I talk, and I haven't had any problems with that at all.
And do you think, I get your point, but do you think there is some like time, space and time appropriate to advertise, or what's your take on that?
Probably it's been it has been suggested to me a lot by all kinds of people. And it's not that I don't want to talk about it. If a person asks a question about it, I'll certainly talk about it. But to me, it just seems odd to call attention to it more than anything else. It's a part of me, but it's not the only thing. And to just go up to a person and sort of tell them just seems kind of odd, because I want to just interact with them like everybody else. But I think there are times where if a person is like overly, really concerned about it, I wouldn't have a problem telling them, oh, this is just how I talk. When, I have a stutter. It's not that there was a time in the past where I didn't want to. I didn't want to sort of come out like that. But at this point, it's not a problem telling them. It just feels odd.
So can I come back to your, a little bit in your story? So you said that you got this message that it's okay, and maybe you shifted the focus to communication rather than thinking about how I look, how I sound. So was it after that you joined the groups, the support groups, or was it you first joined the groups and then you went to the speech therapist and shifted that look? Which went first?
I saw the speech therapist before any of this, because I really hadn't confronted anything. It didn't, I think I was just so afraid of confronting it. I really worked hard to not even take my speech into account at all. It was a problem that was there, but I wasn't I wasn't addressing it at all. So talking to her was the only time I really talked to anybody about this huge problem. Everybody else, I never talked about it at all prior to 2018 to anybody. It would come up. I mean, a person might have a question once in a while. I would, answer as quickly as I could and get out of it, because I saw it as just this terrible thing. I saw it as something I wanted to get rid of, and I couldn't. And I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to have anything to do with it at all. So when I saw her, she suggested I go to the NSA, which is the National Stuttering Association, and they meet in person once a month. And when I first went to it, I was scared. I was really scared. I didn't want to go. I was like, who are these people? What are they going to say? What are they going to think? I didn't know anything about it. But I went, and everybody was so nice and so encouraging and so positive that all of a sudden I realized this thing that I saw as being so bad and so horrible for so long, it really wasn't. It wasn't a big deal. I was making it a big deal. So that was also conquering that fear of even talking about it, going to a place where the point of being there is to talk about this thing that I felt so terrible about. So that was really hard also. But it helped so much. It was a tremendous help. because then once you start talking about it, you realize it's not so bad. And there are other people out there like just like I am, And so when I looked at it as I was so harsh about, I have to speak fluently and my words have to be perfect, and I go to this place where everybody talks like me, and so I realized I could like talk to them and see who they really were. Like they're really good people. They have, jobs and lives and friends. And when I realized that, I'm like them. I'm just like everybody else. So that helped me a lot. And then I went online and I found tons of groups. So
Right.
I mean, it took a while. It was about a year and a half process. Like I read everything. I read all the posts that I could read. I read articles. I read papers. I read everything. I took in all the information that I hadn't for years and years and years. And that was helpful too, because it helped me realize that it's not this horrible thing. It's just like whatever it is, it's some glitch, and it's just how I talk. And there are things I can do to help it. They're not always easy. I don't always try to control it, but I can certainly speak easier than I once could, which has been a huge help.
And you mentioned that like you feel that stuttering doesn't affect your like professional thing, that like that you like how you reveal yourself at work. So and that usually to me is a sign already of like the confidence we like did anything change at work after that like new perspective, if you wish, or not really in like this field?
I don't know that anything in my actual job changed that much, but I know the way I relate to people and the way that I communicate changed a lot. Prior to like say 2018, I would do everything online that I possibly could. I would do email, I would text, anything that didn't involve talking, I would do. I manage a lab, so I have a team that works under me, and I also interact with clients also. So there's a lot of talking in that, but for a long time, I would talk as little as I possibly could. I would do everything via email that I possibly could. I thought email was the greatest thing ever because it meant I didn't have to make a call, So what's changed is now I'm much more willing to call when I have to call, and it is easier, honestly. I mean, for years I was like, why don't people just email? But honestly, to pick up a telephone and call a person when you have a question is really easier. It's a lot quicker. It wasn't I didn't think it was for a long time, but when I look at it from an objective way, it's a lot easier and a lot quicker also. So I think that has really improved a lot, is that now if I have a question, I'll just call. Or before, when if a client had a question, I would not necessarily, I would try to answer them through electronic ways, whereas I don't now. So now I'm much more willing to be on conference calls, video calls, all of that. So I don't know that it necessarily, I mean, I would do those things before also, but it was a lot harder, and I would feel it would take a lot of energy because I would have to prepare myself ahead of time. Then I would feel terrible afterwards because I thought that, I didn't talk, and, my speech wasn't perfect, so I would feel horrible afterwards. It was just this whole process where I just felt terrible all the time. So if anything's changed, it's that I don't have that now. I don't have to spend 20 minutes preparing to make a 2-minute call, or I don't feel horrible afterwards. If I trip on a word, whatever, I just go on. So I think, if anything, I think my overall job has become a little bit easier because I don't have all that processing of, how can I ask this question, and what's the easiest way, and can I email them, and are they there, and will they respond, and I need to know now, and what do I have to do, and all of that takes up a lot of time and a lot of energy. So being able to just hop on a conference call or call a person, or even just go up to a person with a question has certainly made the quality of my time at work a lot more profitable, I guess. Like I feel, I feel more like I'm present there. I can do more. I have more energy. That kind of thing.
Got you. That's beautiful. And coming back to fear, so what you're saying, that's my interpretation, that the biggest factor in conquering the fear is actually truly feeling that it's okay to stutter, it's okay to be you, it's okay to be present and truly be communicating. Or maybe you put it differently. What's the biggest kind of really factor that helps conquer the fear?
You have to determine what you're afraid of. So, like I said, I was afraid of judgment. I was afraid of internal judgment and external judgment also. I thought people thought, I ought to be trying harder. They thought something that I could control it when I can't a lot of the time. I mean, sometimes I can, but not all the time. So I thought this was in a person's head, and what I realized was most people don't know anything about this at all. They don't know what techniques are out there. They don't know what you've tried. They don't know what you could do or should do. They don't know any of that. So I was putting all of that on them. So taking away the fear of external judgment was huge. Like most people, and it took me about a year where when I would talk to people, I looked at them and I saw, do they look angry, annoyed, impatient, any of those things that I thought in my head that they were, and it wasn't there. They didn't look angry, they didn't look annoyed. Some of them were impatient, but it wasn't a lot really. And I think overall, when I realized that they're not judging me, well, there were two different parts of that. One, are they actually judging me? Most of the time, they probably were not. Number two, if they were, why do I care? I don't have to care what anybody else's opinion is. If they think I ought to work harder or I ought to use a technique or not, that's on them. So really realizing that, first of all, they probably are not really caring anyway. But on top of that, even if they are, I don't have to be. I don't have to allow that to put pressure on to me. So when I really processed that and looked at that, and that's where I think advertising can sometimes help. Because if you talk to people, if you really ask them, if you think a person is really judging you, ask them. Say, when I talk like this, what is that? What's your opinion of that? And usually you'll find they're thinking positive things, like, oh, wow, you have a hard time talking, but yet you're willing to talk. You know what I mean? So if you, I haven't talked to people I don't know, but people that I do know that I hadn't talked with previously, I did ask them, like, what is it like to sort of hear it? What is it like to be the person who has to listen? And all they said was like positive things. It wasn't what I thought.
Right.
So when I realized, like, it's not the bad things. The bad things that I thought for years were never true. So that sort of helped a lot. And then the internal thing is that when I realized there is no real cure, because I think that's the problem, is that from the time I was maybe 6 years old to, say, 15, it was drilled into me that I wasn't working hard enough. The reason my speech wasn't fluent was because I wasn't working hard enough. So I really internalized that, because I do work hard at everything else. So, and I think I sort of compensated by working harder at everything else, because I wanted to prove that I was, like, working hard, But it seemed like no matter what I tried, it didn't help me, because I always had this pressure, like, I have to be fluent, I have to be fluent. And what I found was that pressure was causing a lot of the problem. When I let go of that, my speech improved a lot. Like, I was able to speak easier, more clearly, but I didn't know. Like, for years, I just went by what I was taught when I was little. When you're taught things as a kid, they just get into your head. And until a person afterwards says, well, how come that's true? And you go, I don't know, because it is. That's when I sort of went over it, and I'm like, why is that true? Why do I have to speak fluently all the time? And I realized I don't have to, and not. And all people are going to trip over a word here or there. Whereas I would get so angry if I tripped. Like, even when I spoke relatively fluently, if I tripped over one of the words, I would get so mad because it wasn't perfect.
Right.
And realizing your speech doesn't have to be perfect. Like, let go of that. So when I let go of those two things, both the internal judgment and the external judgment, a lot of the fear went away, because I wasn't afraid of a person having a reaction. I wasn't afraid of that now. So that's what I mean by conquer the fear. It's not so much like some people say, do the things that you're do the things that you're afraid of. And that is true. In the beginning, you're going to be scared. Like, I didn't want to go ask a question of a, cashier. I didn't want to talk to anybody I didn't really know. But I had to sort of be in that place, and it was scary. I was very, very scared, because that, what am I going to do? Are they going to look at me weird? Like, all of that was, like, on me. And I had to sort of go, I had to push through that, and I had to go up to them, ask my question, look at them. If I tripped on one of the words, I tripped on one of the words, and realize that it's okay. Because it's really only through practice that you realize it's okay. Like, people didn't really react if I talked to them confidently, if I asked my question confidently. They didn't act odd. They didn't seem to have a problem with it at all. So in the beginning, it was trying the things that were hard. And I didn't go to, like, the hardest thing right away. I tried little, easier things, like I say one word and then kind of run away, and then, ask one question and run away, and then kind of talk to them for a longer time. And the more positive interactions I had, the easier it became. So now I'm not afraid now. Like, I can talk to anybody about anything. I can make a call to anybody anytime. I still don't like introductions on work calls. They're getting easier, but I don't love them, honestly, because I do still have in my head a little bit of, are they going to think I'm not professional, which isn't true, and I know it's not true, but I'm still working on that. But I've conquered a lot of the other things because I've proven that it's okay. And I also know that if I get a reaction, I can look at the person and talk to the person. I can tell them what's wrong, tell them what's happening, sort of walk through it. I haven't had to yet, but I'm ready to, because whereas I wasn't like that previously. Previously, if a person even brought it up, I would feel super bad for the whole day. But at this point, I know I can just say, hey, I have a stutter. And actually, I've only had to do it once. And the one time I did, the person, of course, felt horrible. They're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it. I'm so sorry. And they felt bad. So it's only been one time, and it was like a while ago. So, but I haven't had to, because once, if I look at the person and I speak confidently, they sort of catch on, and it's okay.
Gotcha. And this development, if you would, because you say it's step-by-step process, was it like after your visit to the speech therapist, NSA, or you had some guidance with the speech therapist that really helped you go through this journey?
I worked with the speech therapist for about a year, and she helped me a lot with that process. All of 2018, really, and we really sort of, so I could sort of try things, and I'd come back in, and we would talk about it, like, how was that? What did you think? What did you feel? She was also a big proponent of journaling, which I love now. Now I journal all the time. So that helps you to get it all out. Like, I didn't know before where these things were coming from, what my opinions were, what my beliefs were. So she would ask me questions, like a question like, why do you have to be fluent? Like, why did I feel I had to be? And I would sit down and just write for like a half an hour, whatever came into my head. And I would start with the topic and go off onto whatever else, and just write and write and write. And when I got it out and looked at it, that's when I could really analyze it and determine what of this is true and what is not.
Right.
What was I taught that was true, and what was I taught that was not true, and sort of work through it like that.
Gotcha. Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah, because not obviously, it's not obvious, but the biggest part of this invisible thing is invisible for ourselves too. We don't like it, so we don't look that way. So journaling really brings that up, and you look from kind of at it objectively, much more objectively. Yeah. And coming back to conquering the fear, one more thing I want to ask, because oftentimes people feel like, okay, I'll conquer the fear, and they go for it, they pick a phone, they make a call, they go to the party, do something. So conquering the fear, as I see it, has kind of three phases. One, before you do something. Then when you're doing something and you're actually having a block or having speech impediment. And third, after that, you also start reflecting on it, or how I did badly, or I did what did they think about me? So, what do you think about these three phases of conquering the fear, and which one feels easier or harder for you, or more important, or how do you see that?
That was a huge part of the process also, because I realized how I talk in terms of the techniques and the actual physical part of it was only a small part of it. A larger part was what was in my head. And so before I talked, no matter what it was, to anybody every time, I would think about, what am I going to say? How am I going to say it? I would pre-plan all of the words. And then when I talk, and I would tell myself, I have to be fluent. I want to be fluent. I got to be fluent. And then when I talked, of course I wouldn't be. So maybe I'd get out a word or two or three, and then I would hit a word that I'd have a problem with, and then I would panic. It would just be absolute panic. And I would try anything I could to get out of that. So there was a lot of like struggling and closing my eyes and turning my head and sort of twitching and all of these things just to get out of it.
Right.
And then when I got through with that interaction, afterwards, I would just feel terrible.
Right.
I would tell myself, you did terrible again. You were not fluent. What's wrong with you? Why can't you be fluent? And this would happen multiple times every day for like 25 years or longer, a long time. It's not a way to live, you know? So part of this process was actually recognizing that. I talked to people that I'm close to, and I said to them, when you talk, what do you do? And they looked at me like I was crazy, and then I would tell them what I did. I said, well, I pre-plan all the words, and I try to see, you know, where's the hard word, and how can I get around it? And I try to speak well, and then when I'm done, I look back on it, and I sort of judge what I did. And they basically said, I don't do any of that. They don't pre-plan words. The words just come out. They have an idea, they want to communicate it, and it just comes out. They also don't judge whether they're fluent or not. That's a thing that I think comes from when I was little, and it was all about, you know, you have to be fluent, and you have to learn how to speak fluent. So I would listen to the words, but not the words, but how they came out. Oh, I tripped on this word. I had 3 repetitions there, or a lot of repetitions there. Whatever it is, you know. So that was a habit I got into. So the first problem is whatever it is that causes it. But the other part of it is all the things I brought to it. Right. So all of that pre-planning and panicking and judgment, I brought that to this whole thing. And I don't have to do that. And that's what I learned pretty early on, I'd say in 2018. And I worked really hard to get out of that. So now I don't plan any words. I can't say I don't ever, but I very rarely change words. What'll happen sometimes is if I know ahead of time there's a word that I have to say, then it might sort of get, you know, I'll get a little bit hung up on it. But in general, I try to talk as much like everybody else does. Like, I don't pre-screen words. I don't pre-plan words. I just have an idea and it comes out. And I'm getting better. The part that I still get hung up on is I do listen to the words and sort of judge how fluent I am. Not all the time. I'm trying to get out of that. That's what I want to get out of. But that's the habit I'm currently working on. I also, I don't panic like I did before. Like when I get caught up, I'm getting more comfortable with just easing through it. I'm not 100%. That's the one thing that I am working on currently, is trying to stutter on words easier. Mm-hmm. So when I get in, you know, like some of it is just internal instinct, you know, like if I start getting caught on one of the words, I'll just try to push through it. You can't really do that. You have to kind of ease through it, and I'm learning that. So because of, like I said, because of my childhood and what I was taught back then, I'm not terribly into learning techniques, because that was like really, that was really pushed on me then. So I have looked at a few out there. Like I said, I read everything. I've been trying to learn from everybody. I want to hear what everybody's tried, what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them. But what I changed is my end goal isn't to be fluent. My goal is to speak comfortably, easily, confidently. Wow. And when I change that, I can speak comfortably, easily, and confidently. Right. I might not be able to speak 100% fluently. Right. So when you change the goal, it changes your opinion of what happened. So when I would have an interaction or ask a question, afterwards I say, was I confident? Was it comfortable to talk? Not, was I fluent? So if you change the goal, you feel more positive when it's all over with. So rather than saying, "Oh, I did a terrible job, I got caught up in this word," I say, I spoke confidently. I spoke the words I wanted to. I did a good job.
Gotcha.
So changing that helps too.
Yeah, that's the great point. Yeah, because the goal, the expectation, like that's what puts a different color to that experience. Gotcha.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned that easier way of stuttering. So is this some technique or techniques that we can still use to make it easier? And are these the same techniques that you were taught back when you were young, or these are different things?
I was only really taught fluency shaping techniques when I was a kid. And even when I went in 2018, it was a lot of like easy onset was the really big technique. That's what it's called. It's pretty much just elongating the beginning of a word, easing into a word. The problem with using them for me is that the way I was taught was you kind of have to pre-plan what the words are to know to ease into them. I have to know what they are. And that doesn't really work for me. I find what really helps me is to be really present. And if I don't want to know what the words are, they just, I have an idea and it comes out. So really getting rid of that pre-planning part is what I had to do to sort of be more present in the, moment. So that's why that technique is hard, because to really do a good easy onset, you have to sort of have what the word is in your head ahead of time.
Right.
So I've been trying breathing more, because I do know that's a problem. Like I guess I can't say I'm doing any technical technique. It's more just trying whatever helps me. I'm trying to undo all of the things that I kind of added on. So one of the things that I used to do was I would inhale, exhale a lot of the air, have only a little bit of air left, and then try to talk. I can tell you 100% this does not work.
Right.
But
gotcha.
When I was having more problems, it would sometimes help, because as I ran out of air, I could squeeze out the word that I was having a hard time with. So making sure that I'm not holding air, making sure that I'm inhaling and exhaling like you generally would. I'm not doing any extra breathing. Like I'm not into the whole hostile breathing. I know that's a technique out there, but just regular inhaling and exhaling, making sure that there's air coming in and air out, because you need the air to talk, basically.
Right.
And for a long time, that was one of my sort of techniques that I learned on my own, was to sort of talk with just a little bit of air and squeeze the word out. And it got words out when I used to get caught on words for like a half a minute, that would help get the word out.
Right.
But it's not a good technique overall. It's just what I did. So learning sort of what I used to do that wasn't helpful, and sort of trying to undo old patterns. I also realized when I was in speech therapy. That word is hard for me for some reason. I don't know why. But when I was in it, that I can, when I get caught on things like that, I can end the word, exhale, inhale, and then talk again. That's a thing that I will do. Not all the time, obviously. Like when we've been talking, I haven't really done that a whole lot. But if there's a time, like usually in more professional things, when I feel like I really want to sort of like present as fluently as I can, I'll try to talk a little bit more slowly, pace the words a little more evenly, make sure I'm inhaling and exhaling. And that's when I'll, like, if I get caught, sort of end it, exhale, inhale, and go. So that's a technique that I use. The thing with it, though, is I'm not very disciplined to do it all the time. Like right now, I'm just talking with you. I'm not trying to concentrate on being as fluent as I can be. So this is kind of how I am all the time. And I mean, compared to what I was, this is okay with me. I don't have any problem with this at all. So, but there are times, like I said, usually when it's in a professional thing where I want to be more fluent, I'll try a little harder to slow down. I'll talk a little more slowly, add pauses, and it does work. Obviously, it does work, especially when I'm under high pressure. Like if I have to make a call, like I said, I don't have any problem with calls now. I'll make a call whenever. I don't have any issue at all. But there are times when I just want to be fluent. I just want it to be easier, like in that way. So I will, like, I'll sort of get myself more calmed down, inhale, exhale, talk slowly, and I can usually get through it with maybe a little bit here or there. But sometimes I just want to be me, and this is who I am and how I am. You know, I don't want to have to concentrate all the time on inhale now, exhale now, pause here, pause there. It's a lot of work that I don't want to do. I just want to be real. I want to be in the moment. I want to be part of what's happening, not trying to process how to get the words out.
Wow. And maybe can I ask you, I don't want to take much of your time, was it like this particular conversation or interview, did you have to conquer any fear to actually say yes and to get on this call interview?
Not to say yes. I will do any interviews with anybody at this point. I feel like if I can, we need people who don't speak fluently or who have more stutters in their speech, talking about this, because unfortunately what we see a lot is people who speak very well, who've like sort of got their technique and it's working, and that's what everybody hears. And I think that for the people that have a harder time talking, you can feel really, like, I know I used to feel horrible. I'm like, well, why can't I talk like that? You know, so I think we need people doing these kind of interviews and talking who don't have the most fluent speech, who have interruptions in their speech. So people can tell, like, it's okay. You know, it's like, I can still communicate. Even if my words aren't perfect, I can still communicate. So I think it's important, but I also know that, especially where I was before, I didn't want to talk. I didn't want people to hear me getting caught up on words. I certainly didn't want anything that I was talking about recorded, because then I would have to hear that after, or I could hear that afterwards. I didn't want to hear that afterwards. I wanted to just pretend that it didn't happen, you know? So, but I feel like that's where I've sort of grown, in that when I do these recordings, I generally do listen to them afterwards, and that sort of can be very helpful to you. You can sort of learn, well, what can I do to make it easier to talk, or to make it more smooth, or to communicate, and to sort of see you like everybody else does, because what's in my head was way worse than what everybody else got, you know? So that's why, like, at this point, I'll talk to anybody, anytime. I will say, before the call, I was a little bit anxious, because, you know, I haven't really done a lot of these, so I was a little bit anxious, but it wasn't that I didn't want to. I didn't have to sort of I didn't have to tell myself, well, you promised it and you have to do it, like I would in the old days. In the old days, I would say, you have to make this call. And they'd be like, I don't want to make this call. Well, you have to make this call. And go, you know, that would go on for like 15 minutes, you know, before I actually did the call. I don't have that now. But I did feel a little bit like, oh, how, you know, what will this be like, how will it go, that kind of thing.
Yeah, actually, I think I'm absolutely sure that every person, when it's like, if we had already 100 calls, maybe it goes without thinking. But if you do this like for the first time with this person, that's already something new. If you're doing a conversation, like an interview for the first time, that's a much bigger deal, of course. So each time we're doing something new, for everyone, it is some uncertainty, something unexpected, and for some reason, this unexpected creates some fear and anxiety for all of us. So that's, I think,
I think anything that you're not accustomed to, like any sort of thing that you're not, like it's kind of like what you just said, and that if you do a lot of them, you get more comfortable, you feel more confident. Like, I feel confident now that I can talk and I can communicate, but I don't feel necessarily confident in this particular call. So it's kind of like, as you have more of them, you feel more confident in this kind of thing, prior to the whole coronavirus, I didn't do a lot of these kinds of calls, but because of that, I've had to get more comfortable with them, because I talk to a lot of people now electronically. Prior to this, I had gotten much more comfortable with the person, where the person's right there. I can look at them, they can look at me. Body language is more of a part of the interaction, whereas it's a little bit harder with this. So getting accustomed to that is, that's where like the practice really comes in, like being able to sort of jump on the lives, or post a recording, just so you feel comfortable with it.
Right.
And that, and to come back around to the whole conquer the fear, that's a large part of it, is just becoming comfortable. Like, you have it in your head, it's going to be so bad. So when you go into something that you think this is going to be so bad, and you try it, and then while I'm actually in it, I sort of go, wait a minute, this isn't that bad. And then after it's over, I say, that was okay. And as you like do that again and again, it's the sort of the accumulation of positive interactions with anything, with these kinds of calls, or just regular calls, or conference calls, or just talking to people. That's what helps you conquer it. That's what helps you get comfortable, is just having it, repeating it again and again and again. But I feel like, and this is like one, and I know it's getting kind of long, but one thing I really do want to put out there is that, like, one of the things I was told when I was a kid was I had to make, say, 10 calls per week. And I did, because I was told I had to, so I'd pick up the phone. Again, I would be in panic mode. I'd be having a panic attack. Right. I would be red. I would turn red. I would be sweating. It was horrible. But I did those 10 calls because they told me I had to make 10 calls. The change is that, but I didn't learn, I learned that I could make a call if I had to, but I didn't get comfortable, because it was just, I was told to, and I have to do this. What I found this time around was, I did it because I wanted to. Like, I want to be okay with this. I want this to be comfortable. So in the beginning, it won't be comfortable. It's going to be hard in the beginning. But that's where, like, looking at it afterwards, when I got off of, like, the first couple of calls, and I said, wow, I thought that was going to be really bad. It was actually okay. Like, that's where, like, talking to people that and asking them what their opinions are, and talking in general, you can feel more comfortable. So it's not just doing the things that you're afraid of, it's becoming comfortable with them.
Right.
It's working through that, so that they're not always hard. Like, I could make 100 calls before, but every call was hard. Now I can make 100 calls and they're easy. It's just sort of learning what you have to do to get from the hard to the easy, and they should get easier as you go on. If they're not getting easier, is a part of the process that isn't really working right.
Gotcha. So it's not only conquering the fear to actually do it, but conquering the fear to be present. And as we said actually before, at the moment, to be in that moment, and maybe even maybe even more importantly, after that, really maybe see that you actually did it, which is great. Like there's a lot of, again, like how we assess things. We can focus on the negative, we can focus on the positive. So really conquering that overall, not just doing it, but really finding the way to connect, to be present, as you say. That's probably the ultimate goal, and the exercise we're all kind of playing with over and over again.
To get comfortable with it. So if you have a call, and I know calls are hard for everybody, it seems, so if you have a call and it's hard for you, after it's over, that's where journaling can be very helpful. Write down what was hard. Why did it seem hard? Why were you afraid? I think that's what helps too, is learning what's causing you to be afraid. And I think that changes for us all, you know. It isn't that you have just fluencies. That isn't what the problem is. There's an underlying problem. What are you afraid of? You're afraid of rejection. You're afraid of judgment. You're afraid of, what are you afraid of? Like, learning that is the key to becoming more comfortable. And if you're not comfortable, it's going to be hard forever. Like, that's what you have to learn, is what part of this is hard. What am I uncomfortable with? Right. And working through that. Yeah. So the actual act of making the call is only one part of it. Yeah. The process also entails analyzing what you do, like, and you can even analyze this ahead of time. Like, if there's something you don't want to do, if it's something where you're just like, I'm really afraid, I don't want to, write down why. Right. Why don't I want to? What is the underlying cause here? If you can address that part of it, it's a lot easier to do. Now, even once you've written this down and you say, all right, I'm afraid of judgment, let's say, and I shouldn't be afraid of that, I won't be afraid of that, you're still going to be afraid originally. You kind of have to prove to yourself afterwards, oh, wait a minute, I didn't have that, it didn't happen, it's okay. Whatever the situation is that I was so afraid of, it didn't happen. So kind of writing that down ahead of time, like, what is the worst thing that could happen? Like, what's the worst case? What are you, like, worried about? What's the absolute worst thing? And then analyzing afterwards, that didn't happen. You can kind of prove that, you know, this is okay. Whatever it is, making a call is okay. You know, and even if a person hangs up on you, then you call back up and say, you know, you just hung up on me. I'm having a hard time talking. Just hang in there, you know, or could you please be patient with me, or something like, you know, tell the person. And I will say, most of the time, they're going to feel bad because they didn't realize that you had a particular problem, you know. So having that confidence to say, what's the worst that can happen? They hang up on me. Okay, fine, I'll call right back. Or they get angry. Who cares? They're angry. If some clerk in some, you know, place is angry because I have a hard time talking, who cares? That's on him, not me. You know what I mean? So working through that, working through what am I afraid of? What's the worst case? And then if you call a person and it goes okay, you can say afterwards, all of that stuff that I was concerned would happen, it didn't happen. It's okay. Or if these things do happen, what will I do?
Right.
So having a real plan ahead of time, and having ideas in your head ahead of time, and then sort of analyzing afterwards, well, what really happened, can prove to you it's okay. And that's kind of the process I went through with everything, is sort of, what is my problem? What is the worst thing that could happen? Then I actually try it. Usually in the beginning you're scared, like really, really scared. You just go through with it. And then at the end you say, that went okay. And these things that I thought would happen, it didn't happen. So after that happens enough, you become more comfortable.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Wow, that's beautiful. So, thank you so much, Lisa, for the beautiful conversation and for the inspiration, because I totally can realize that for many people, even joining a group, leaving a comment, making a post, that seems like a huge thing out of the comfort zone. And like making a video or going live or an interview, that's maybe even like seems kind of impossible. So we need to start somewhere into like in this revelation journey. That's why I really want to thank you for really showing how it can happen for us. We don't have to stay invisible, actually. That's for sure.
If I could just add one last thing, is like, that's a great thing about these online groups, is you've got is that you have access to people just like you 24 hours a day. There are people all over the whole world. There are people everywhere that you can talk to people any time of the day. If you're having a hard time, if you're having a particular issue, if something's hard for you, you can really find there are so many groups where you can find people that are really encouraging and working on things that you're currently working on. And that's what has helped with me, is that, if I had a hard day, I could write that. Or if someone else had a hard day, I could encourage them. You've got this, we really have access to all of these groups online that previously we didn't have. Like at this point, you can really get that sort of encouragement. And while I don't do a lot of videos just because they're harder, you have to be at a certain place, I want to be alone, I want to record them, whatever. But they do, it's a good place to sort of put those things up, because everybody here is going to be very positive and encouraging. You're not going to get criticism because you tripped over one of the words. I mean, I don't think that would happen anywhere, but especially in these stuttering groups, you'll find a lot of positivity, a lot of encouragement. So that's really take the time to try them out, even if you just kind of like hang out for a while. You don't have to post, you don't have to make a comment, but if you feel okay, it's only going to be positive. That's a really good place to sort of practice the things that you find hard, because it's in a place where everybody's going to be encouraging you. So you practice it in places like here, then you can go out into the real world where it's a little bit harder, but you'll have all the positives from the practice.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And again, I had a thought that making comments is also the form of journaling, actually, which is really interesting as well.
Absolutely.
So again, thank you so much. Thanks everyone who's been watching or will watch, and thank you, Lisa.